Hello, and welcome to Firehouse Table Talks podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Toma. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm also a career firefighter and paramedic with over 20 years on the job. On this podcast, the views and opinions expressed are those of the participants, and they in no way reflect the views or opinions of our employers. This podcast serves to give a unique peek behind the curtain into the lives of our nation's first responders, military veterans, and their families. These are their stories, raw and uncensored. Now, pour yourself a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and join us at the table. Thanks for tuning in. Now, on to our show. This afternoon we have Joseph Bonanno with us. He retired from the FDNY after 21 years of service. World-renowned chef.
I don't know about world-renowned, but...
Author of, 3 cookbooks now?
Yep.
And even a children's book.
Yeah, children's storybook, yep.
Okay.
And I just
recently
launched the YouTube Firehouse Cooking Show.
Yep, that's on the list to talk about, too.
Yeah.
I was on there checking it out.
Yep.
Was it, you made the other, was it some bread pudding or?
Yeah, bread pudding was the first one I wanted to make. That was the best recipe out of the most recent book. And I built the set myself, actually. It looks like an old New York nostalgia.
I was going to ask you about that. It's a pretty elaborate, looks like a nice little firehouse theme there.
Yeah.
Even with a pole. It has a pole?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to, I wanted, aside from a cook, I mean, I wanted to have the best, I get to have the best signature entrance of any chef. I get to slide down a pole. Bobby Flay.
Yeah.
Rachel Ray, Emerald, they can't slide that. It's not their thing. They didn't come from a firehouse. So I wanted to use whatever uniqueness I could add to it. And certainly
that's an entrance you won't find anywhere else, that's for sure.
Yeah, only I think Dean Martin and Hugh Hefner had a pole in his mansion. Or a strip club. Other than that, those three.
You don't have one of those in the backyard, do you?
No, I don't. No. And there's not going to be any strippers coming down the pole.
Well, okay. So during your time in service there for FDNY, you were on engine 319, ladder 129, ladder 152, correct?
Correct.
Where did you do most of your time for New York?
The bulk of my time was in ladder 129.
Okay.
I came out of probationary fire school. I went to engine 319, which is in Middle Village, Queens. But it was a single engine house. It was on a side street. Not guys. But they were all, I was a 25-year-old get-up-and-go fireman, and I got to go to what, they said, not a retirement house, but it was basically where guys that worked in busy areas kind of wanted to do their last 10 years on the job in a slower type of firehouse. Great fireman, tons of experience, and it was quiet. I mean, it was deadly quiet, which, later in your career you might want that, but not when you're 25 years old. And then, a funny story about that. One of my friends was asking me when I first came out of probie school, he was asking me, hey, so how do you like it? Must be, I go, not really. I says, and at the time when I'm 25, anybody that was 40 was ancient. So I said, I like it. And the guys are all nice. And firefighters are all nice and everything. But I mean, the youngest guy there is like 35. And that's like ancient. I go, some of them are even 50, which I thought was like ancient. But the one thing good about that firehouse that I loved, great officers, great firemen, plus they had tons of experience in the busy ghetto areas and stuff like that. They just wanted a little bit quiet. But because it was so busy in New York at the time, which was the 80s, 79, 80, it was so busy, and the really busy firehouses were so busy that every third night we would have to interchange, they used to call it. And we would interchange with engine 332, which was in the heart of Bushwick, Brooklyn, which was like rocking for fires. So every third night I got to live, I used to call it a version of Apocalypse Now, because when I went from quiet area of Queens to this Bushwick section of Brooklyn, I mean, you're talking 3 all hands a night, 5 car fires, one to another. I mean, it was really crazy. And the reason they did the city did the interchange is because those firemen were getting so beat up every night.
I bet.
Yeah, they needed a break. So they were sending them to a slower house, which engine 319 was. No disrespect, but and that being a fireman working in the part of I don't want to use the word ghetto. It's kind of not politically correct, but a real busy, bad section of Brooklyn. Yeah, that really opened your eyes to what really being a fireman is really like.
You think about it, that's a good concept, is to take, the busy crew will never tell you that they're tired and they
Nope.
just would
Nope.
like a day off.
Nope.
But to force them to take that day off, because we've got, I think we're up to 35 firehouses here in Columbus, Ohio. And when you get, we call it TT, it's a temporary transfer for the day. If somebody calls off sick and they move you to a different firehouse, if you're an extra body on those days, because I worked inner city for years and up all night. Of course, you want to do that when you're young, like you said. You want to get those runs and get that experience, and you don't mind being up all night. But as you get older, it's a little harder.
Yeah, and then,
so when you would get sent to one of the slower houses, you're like, this isn't bad.
Well, for those guys, yeah, and then for those guys in Engine 332, I'm sure they said, not now, but sometime in the future, I could see myself transferring for good to a place like that. And I actually have a funny New York story about that, because I had a temporary they wanted us to work time in an engine and a ladder company too. So they did me, and I had a death in the family, so they wanted me to get out of the slow fire. So they gave me a temporary detail to ladder 151 and engine 305, which is in Forest Hills, Queens. Really nice section of Queens. Engine 30, I was in the ladder company, but engine 305 was also interchanging. But it was such a really nice neighborhood, and all the people in the neighborhood would come by and bring cakes and stuff to the firefighters. And so some woman from the community board actually brought a cake by, and she says, "Where's all the engine 305 guys?" And the guy that was from the busy company of the Bronx said to him, "Oh, ma'am, we're from a busy section of the South Bronx, and we do what we call an interchange. Like, we're so busy and engine 305 is so slow that every third night we come in and kind of give them a rest and give us a rest and let them have a busy night in the South Bronx." And she said, "Excuse me?" She goes, "You mean to tell me the community's being protected by tired firemen?" And she went to
we're all tired.
Well, not retired, but tired.
No, we're all tired at some level, but yeah.
So she went back to the community board and said, "We can't have, tired firemen here protecting our district." And she went to the city, and it was the only firehouse in New York City that didn't allow interchange, because the community board said, no, we're not going to be protected by tired firemen. They can't do their job.
Oh boy.
So that was a little bit of controversy, but Forest Hills got a powerful community board, so they stopped interchange for engine 305.
And then, so we're going to get into your passion for cooking, but I'm sure it probably started somewhere around a firehouse. It always seems to.
Yeah, well, my father was a firefighter in the South Bronx for 34 years. Right. And to be honest with you, I don't recall him ever speaking about the meals and anything like that. He was pretty quiet about it, actually, until the time for me to take the test. Then he wanted me to get on the fire department and at least take the test. And he never spoke a lot about it, so I was kind of naive about it. So when I got to engine 319, first night, I think it was a night tour. It was the first night I worked, and we weren't interchanging. And Ally Adivio, I'll never forget, a great cook, great fireman. I'll never forget. I'm like, I didn't know that you even eat. I didn't know they sat down, and it was all new to me. And he says, "Oh no, you in on the meal?" And I go, "Oh, I thought we're going out to like McDonald's or something." And he goes, "Oh no, we're having chicken cutlet parmesan tonight with garlic bread and mashed potatoes." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do: eat with everybody." And I mean, he put down this plate of food with chicken cutlet pieces the size of gas pedals on a car, smothered in cheese, smelled delicious. And I'm like, I sat down, I had this great meal. Our tour was like 6 at night till 9 the following morning, 15 hours. 9 o'clock, I had this chow's on, sit down, had this delicious meal. I'm like, yeah, $3. I'm like, $3.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we get paid for that.
Yeah, and I'm like, $3. Garlic bread, big pieces of chicken cutlet the size of your gas pedal on your car. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's dessert too. I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic.
I'm going to get fat real quick.
Right. Well, because I had a big appetite, so they were saying, I remember them saying to me, "You're going to be a big man on this job if you keep eating like that." But I just had a big appetite.
We always tell our new recruits when they come out there, it's kind of say, you guys are going to put on your freshman 15 eating at the firehouse.
Yeah, yeah,
Your first year on company, when you start eating all this firehouse food, you start packing it on.
yeah. So I did really like to cook, and early on, I remember when I was growing up watching the show, The Galloping Gourmet.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not remember him. He was around a long time ago. He was one of the first
Oh,
cooking
I do.
shows. Yeah, he was one of the first cooking shows out there. And I was single at the time, still am, but I was single at the time, and I remember, you know, yeah, make a girl a nice dinner. It's pretty impressive. This was before the fire department. And then I
Yeah.
got on the fire department, so a few nights I'd say, hey, listen, Al, or one of the other firefighters, I'd say, hey, I'm going to take the wheel tonight. Let me see what I can conjure up. And yes, you're under the gun. And I wasn't a professional chef, cook, or anything at the time. Just if you want to use the word, half-ass firehouse cook, baked chicken, mashed potatoes, carrots, something basic. But then, you
Yeah.
start to really like it, and you have that downtime, especially I was in a slower company, you have that downtime. So then I started to well, what I did see is, like you said, these firefighters were all, and nothing, no disrespect, they were all kind of overweight, unfit, end of career, and I said, listen, I don't want to be a big man on this job. I don't want to end up like that. So let me think about, and I had just gotten certified as a fitness trainer and a nutritionist. So, I was remember watching when I transferred there and I went to ladder 129, which was a double house, engine 273, 129. Great place to work, Flushing, Queens. Busy, great guys. Now you're cooking for 12 people, and I'm new there, so I'm not going to jump behind the stove. I said, all right, let's eat with, and I, to this day, I remember the guy making mashed potatoes, and he had, the big thing of butter that you get to store with 4 sticks in it. And he was
Yeah.
he was peeling them like bananas and dropping them in the mashed potato. But it was literally, he had it like a banana. He was peeling the stuff off the one size of the thing, 4 to a container. And I'm like, George, have you heard about the ongoing cholesterol problem?
I can
And
hear your arteries screaming.
yeah, and especially I was only 3 years on the fire department at the time. You're not going to question the salty, cigar chomping, big armed, big
Right.
burly ghetto fireman. You're not going to question his. And he goes, hey, kid, you're not going to live forever. Just don't worry about it. You can't worry about cholesterol. You can't put out fires on his job with lettuce.
You work it off on a fire scene. It's fine.
Yeah, or, I can't put out fires with lettuce. Okay. You know, so when the crew shift changed, I said, you know what, I'm going to have a little bit more knowledge of nutrition. Let me just start trying to, so like mashed potatoes, for example, I would use roasted garlic. I'd roast some garlic, mix that in instead of butter. And, the firefighters took to it. They're like, no difference in the taste. You don't want to tell it's healthy because all of a sudden they think it's going to be flavorless.
Right.
So you just do your thing. I go, get out of the kitchen, do your thing. And I had a little more time on now, and we had other guys less time than me. So I'd say, listen, just don't worry about it. I'll call you when chow's ready. So I would do that. I put, that in, and then, you know, and the shift changed, not the shift that we worked on, but the society's shift towards fitness, nutrition, exercise, and actually Arnold Schwarzenegger in his early years, he's the one that kind of brought the whole country towards fitness. He was on the President's Council of Fitness, for health and fitness, and the whole country was going that way. And especially our job because it's so dangerous and physically demanding. So they started to take to it a little bit. And then the whole book thing, a complete and total fluke.
Yeah, let's talk about the first cookbook. Which one was it? The
The
Healthy
Healthy
Firehouse
Firehouse
Cookbook.
Cookbook. And that's why they
Yeah.
call it healthy. Well, to update on the history of firehouse cooking, which has always been a tradition since the Ben Franklin days. Matter of fact, I put a chapter on the history of firehouse cooking in the book. In 1984, John Cennino, he worked in Engine 58, the Harlem Hilton, I think they called it. He was a great cook, not a professional chef, and he did a very small cookbook, a paperback. It had, I think he did initial run, it was 5,000 copies, just recipes from guys he worked with and stuff he made. He made really good rice pudding, great cook, great guy, great fireman. And it's the craziest story because his book led to my book. So that was 1984. And Phil Donahue, who's from Chicago, had his show. He was coming to New York, the Phil Donahue show, coming to New York. So he asked his producers, he listen, on my first show, I want to warm up to the New York audience. Does anybody have any ideas? And he goes, well, I'll tell you, New Yorkers, the whole country, they love firefighters. And they always see them in the supermarket. And they know they cook. This guy just wrote a little paperback cookbook. Why don't we have him on as a guest and a few of his fireman friends? And it'll make you warm up to the New York audience. So he did it. So unbeknownst to John, the word now is viral. I don't know what the word was back then. That segment put his little paperback on the New York Times bestseller list for 9 weeks in a row. It just became a thing. It became like what they call viral now. At that point, it went crazy. I mean, he was on. Imagine being on with a paperback cookbook on the New York Times bestseller list for 9 weeks in a row. Sold like crazy. Donated money to the Burn Center. But John, unfortunately, he wound up having a triple bypass based on the 4 sticks of butter and mashed potatoes and stuff like that. And again,
traditional firehouse cooking, yeah,
traditional firehouse. Don't worry about your health cooking. Just eat. And again, I don't mean to do that as a point of disrespect for John, because he was right. I'm not a doctor. I didn't diagnose that he ate too much butter in his career, but he did. His recipes had no consideration for that at all. So I took a class at the new school called How to Write a Cookbook and Get It Published. I really kind of just took it. I wasn't hell-bent on publishing a book. I go, you know what? It's a summer Saturday in Manhattan. I was in between shifts. I just got off duty working a place in Manhattan. And I said, instead of going home, this is a new course, I'll just take it. Maybe there'll be some nice-looking girls in the class, and they'll say, oh, the fireman that cooks. So I just took it like that. And it turns out that there was the first time the school ran the course on writing a cookbook, and there was like 75 people in the class. All the company that I was in was like, this guy went to the Culinary Institute of Hyde Park. This guy was a professional chef in Sweden. This guy, I'm like, wow, look at the company. And I'm just like a local fireman cook.
Yeah.
And this teacher said, all right, we're going to go around the room before the class starts. Everybody say your idea for a book. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have an idea for a book. And everybody there had like stacks of recipes with them, ready to write. And I'm like, wow. So I said, look, think quick. So as they got to me, I said, well, listen, it was a fireman cookbook in 1984. This was in 1993. Fireman wrote a cookbook in 84, New York fireman, and it was on the bestseller list for 9 weeks in a row. But unfortunately, he wound up having a heart attack. And I have just gotten certified as a fitness trainer nutritionist. And I said, if I was going to do a cookbook, it would be a Healthy Firehouse Cookbook. And the teacher said, wow, that's a good idea. Why don't you mention it this afternoon? We have an editor coming in. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm really on the spot. I don't have even a recipe with me.
You had an editor coming into the class you were just sitting in just to meet women.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons. And I said, I'll get the information. And if I ever feel like it, who knows? So the editor comes in. She gives her dissertation on what it's like to write a cookbook. You have to get an agent. You have to do a query letter. You have to do this. You have to have recipes. I'm like, wow, I don't have any of this. I am not mentioning my idea. Especially, I'm surrounded by people who are professional chefs with great ideas. And if I take over the conversation too much, let me know.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, yeah. It's kind of an interesting story, lengthy, but the teacher. So the editor from Hearst gives her dissertation, and then she says, "I'm going to open the floor for 5 minutes. Anybody got any ideas? Throw them out there." Everybody's hand went up but mine. And because it's New York and she's an editor from Hearst, they're name dropping. They're like, oh, I went to Culinary Institute in Hyde Park. I've trained in France and Sweden, and I want to do a French cookbook. She goes, there's dozens of French cookbooks out there. Next. I mean, she was that cold. And somebody, and then somebody else.
Just shutting down ideas left and right.
Left and right. And, oh, hi, I'm a single girl, and I'd like to do a single gal's cookbook. And she's like, no, not good enough. Next. So I'm like, all right, I'm shrinking in the seat. So the teacher says, thank you. 5 minutes is up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. But don't be shy if you have a really good idea. Like on fireman, for instance. Like, oh my God, he doesn't put me on the spot now. Joe, would you say
Oh,
you're
I
right?
threw you under the bus?
Yeah. So
Ah,
Eddie said, Joe, would you say your idea? Oh my God. All right. Listen, I'm a New York City fireman. 13 years at the time. I said, listen, there was a book in 1984 that was really popular, but he had a triple bypass. I do have a fitness and nutrition degree from NYU. If I was going to do a cookbook, it would be a Healthy Firehouse Cookbook. She goes, fabulous idea. Stay after class. I'd like to talk to you. So
wow.
and all 75 people in the class were ready to kill me because they came to get noticed, and I did it. And
Classically trained chefs,
yeah, could blow me
and
away.
they're looking at a firehouse
Me,
cook like,
yeah, like meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and that's the
I
girl.
love it.
That's the person. So I went up to her. She said, "Here's my card. Do you have an agent?" And I go, "Ma'am, I'm a fireman. I don't have an agent." She goes, "Well, this is how it works. I'll have somebody call you Monday." And that's really how it really works. You have to get an agent interested first. Then the agent has to get them interested. But it actually worked backwards for me because the editor was already sold on the idea.
Wow.
Yep.
Talk about fate.
Fate and right place, right time.
Yeah.
So I put an ad in Firehouse magazine, asking for, because they didn't want to make it a New York fireman cookbook like the other one. They wanted to have national appeal. So I put an ad in Firehouse magazine asking for recipes. If you get in, I'll put it in there and send you a free book. And, of course, the fire community responded, and I got like 150 recipes, about 60 of my own, the editors, and, we worked through the process, and then they offered me, yeah, okay, it's on. Here's a contract for advance against royalties. And I'm like, oh my God. And meanwhile, it was so funny. I go back to the firehouse, you can imagine the feedback.
Oh, yeah, I already know what's coming here.
Yeah, right. You could hear what's coming, and any fireman that's listening to that, you could hear what's coming, especially because I was just average in the cooking department. And they were like, no, fill in the expletive, no effing way. They're going to, I'm like, I'm
You can't
telling you.
even make ice cubes. You're writing a cookbook?
Right, right, right. You have trouble making ice cubes. I like that. Yeah, so, and then it got to be almost stupid because they're like, all right, yeah, so maybe this is going to happen for you. I don't know, but what do you think you're going to be on? Next thing you know, you think you're going to be on TV or something? Like, I'm not kidding. An hour later, a phone call comes in. Oh, hi, this is some cooking show in New York. Because the woman sitting next to me actually worked for the Newsday on Long Island, and she said, I'd like to do a story. I said, okay. And she did a story. So that story led to a TV station seeing the article and said, so it was so funny because I almost had my comeuppance because they were like, all right, big deal. I don't think you're going to be on some kind of shows. And I go, I don't know what's going to happen from it. An hour later, the phone rings. Hi, this is some food show in Manhattan. We'd like to have you on as a guest. So he's like, Joe, there's a phone call for you, and it just went like that. All right, so it's a local regional show. It's not like it's something national. A week later, it's the Regis Philbin show. They're talking about Gavin. Like, it started to be like, they started to not question it anymore. So
Yeah, you
anyway,
got quite the resume. You did Regis, you did the
oh,
Today Show,
Martha Stewart
CBS
Show.
Morning Show.
It really got crazy after a while.
That's great.
It really got crazy. So, yeah, we did the first book, did a national tour, which was great, all across the country, which was, it was really great. And then the local fire community, whatever town I was in, it really was terrific. It led to so many great things. I got to share it with everybody I work with. So I said, listen, I don't want to make this about me. However we can, I donated money to the Burn Center. And I go, anybody comes to the fires, this is a group effort. It's not me. I have certainly other great cooks here. I'm lucky. So I tried to share it this way. It wasn't all about me. And especially when they came to do stories, I go, listen, cooking's great, but we're firemen first. That's what this is about. You know what I mean? So I don't want you to come in here thinking that all we do is lay around and make shrimp Creole. And, so they were I made sure anybody that came to do anything, that was the primary reason for being there, and to share it with firefighters I work with. Like I said, if I get invited to the Regis show, I go, listen, I work with a whole crew of guys. They would love to come in here. Oh, yep. Okay. No problem. Bring them in. So I got to share it with everybody. That was fun. A lot of articles and papers and stuff like that, which was great. So, yeah, I mean, and then
Pretty
that
much
book,
took off like, pardon the pun, but like a wildfire.
well, and one thing leads to another. Once you're on one show, somebody else sees you, and other people see you, and um, one thing, it starts feeding off each other. And then my schedule was crazy because I was still working full time. And, a lot of these shows, they want you there like at 5 in the morning. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm working. I mean, I can't. Or, a lot of funny stuff happened. One time we had a woman from a local newspaper come, or was it regional newspaper come, and she wanted to do a story, and she came with a whole crew with camera and stuff like that. And, next thing you know, we get a run to 1075, which is an all hands working fire, and she's filming us going out. Oh, that was great. Come back. We got to get him jumped. I go, I can't come back. We're going to a real, like, I know it's Hollywood, but this isn't Hollywood. This is for real.
Yeah, it's kind of our job. We got a job to do. I'll be back in a few.
Yeah, no, come back. We didn't get it right. The lighting wasn't great. The lady, I mean, come on. So there was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with it. So that led to, the book did well. They did another one, a grilling cookbook in '98, which was great. That happened. And then, my career was kind of coming to a climax right around 9/11. I have a completely crazy story some other time. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to fill that story in right now, but I actually was doing a live TV segment. Bronzoni Pasta, which is local to New York, was having a cooking contest, New York Fireman cooking contest. And because of all the stuff that happened to me, they wanted me to judge the contest and then promote it on TV. So I mean, no ducks could have lined up more terribly than what happened on 9/11, because they called me in August and they said, "Hey, Joe, listen, we're doing this contest and we'd like you to promote it on TV because of all the stuff that happened to you. And you're also going to judge the contest, but we want you to do some TV promotional stuff. Are you available September 8th, 2001?" I go, "Yeah." And we're going to do it at your firehouse, which was at that time, which was Ladder 152. That was my last 5 years. It was Ladder 152 at Towerline. And I said, "Yeah, no problem." So that was all set. About a week before, I get a phone call. "Joe, it's the TV station WB11. The crew doesn't want to come all the way out to Queens because they're located in Manhattan. Would you mind coming to Manhattan?" And I said, "No, not at all." "Well, we got it lined up at Ladder 3. I get choked up if I talk about this, but we got it lined up at Ladder 3 in Manhattan. I said, "Yeah, okay." My brother used to work right down the road from there. So I said, "Yeah," and I actually knew a few firefighters in that company. And he says, "The only thing is they can't do it on the 8th. Are you available the morning of September 11th? I mean, 2 weeks before, who knew? I said, "Yeah." "All right, well, we'll send a car service person for you. They'll pick you up at like 5 in the morning, take you to Ladder 3 on 13th of Broadway." Okay. I roll up the morning of September 11th. Beautiful day. Nothing going on. I meet all the firefighters. 2 of them work with my brother. 2 of them I knew. And we start doing this. And it was live. It was live. It was not recorded. It was a live segment. And the host of the TV show was there with us. And he was a bit of a character, and he wanted to, like, we're going to have like a mini contest, Joe against me, and we're going to bring it out on the streets of New York and serve it to people and see if they like it. Whatever you want to do, So we're doing the
Sure.
segment. All these firefighters are hanging around, including Captain Patty Brown. I'm sure you know that name. Pat Brown from New York City. Captain Patty Brown was the captain of Ladder 3. He was on the day shift that day. He wasn't working the night before. He showed up at like 8 o'clock. All before any of this even went down. So,
Right.
I met him. I said, "Hey, Captain Brown, how do you do?" He actually thought I was from the media unit or something. I go, "No, I'm not just a fireman. I'm not from the media unit." And then the guys are great, and they were all kidding around. And, we do this whole live segment. And then the last part of the segment was at like 8:35. The plane hit at 8:46. So the firefighters there were like, "Joe, you're going to get caught in traffic if you go home. It's going to be bumper to bumper traffic." Plus the girl that was there, who worked for the pasta company, said, "Joe, I got bad news. The car service guy is in the Bronx. He can't get here for an hour." I said, "Yeah, okay, no problem." And the guy, "Great." They're like, "Great, Joe, come back in the kitchen. We'll all eat the food you made." And to this day, I can remember as clear can be. All of a sudden, she gets a phone call. She says, Joe, I got good news. Our car service person, there's another one right around the block. He can pick you up right now. It's at 8:40. Plane hit at 8:46. It's okay. And the firefighters there were all passed and were killed that morning.
Well, knowing full well too, if that wouldn't have happened, you would have been hanging out, drinking coffee with the guys.
And away I went.
Probably jumped on the truck.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I get chills when I even think about it.
So fate kind of stepped in a way.
So I jumped on, and there were two guys there that were on light duty also that were in a department suburban. They said, Joe, we can't drive you out to Long Island where I live, but we could check. I go, no, they have a car person here. So they jumped in I thought they got killed, but they didn't. They jumped in their car and took off too, and I did. And I got in the car and pulled out, going towards the Queens Midtown Tunnel. And the plane must have flew right over me because it was 8:46, 8:47. And I hear a million fire trucks, but you hear that in New York all the time. I mean, there's nothing but sirens going off all the time in New York. So I'm like, no big deal. But it did sound a little odd. So I said to the guy, put the radio on for a second. And it just happened. He says, we didn't interrupt this program. We got some reports that a small plane has hit the World Trade Center. Now, I'm going up 6th Avenue. I could actually turn my head and see the World Trade Center. And I'm like, small plane? I mean, the signature of the plane, and you saw that, it took up 6 floors. I go, that was no small plane. Yeah, then they started saying it might have been a commercial plane. And I'm looking, I'm like, it's perfectly clear out. There's no clouds. It's not foggy. Something's not right, And then we get about and now I hear a million fire trucks. And I'm like, wow. And I knew, but I said, this is not something. But no, never thinking anything like that. I just still was getting sketchy stories. Went into the Queens Midtown Tunnel. We lost reception. Came out of the Queens Midtown Tunnel. I turn around and I see the second plane hit. I didn't see the plane, but I saw the explosion on the second tower. I'm like, oh my God. Now the radio station's like, no, this is intentional. A second plane, commercial airliner has hit. And I'm like, wow, oh my God. So I said to the guy, turn the car around. He turns the car right before where the tunnel is, Queens Midtown Tunnel. And I said, it doesn't, and I had my badge out. No, it does fireman, police, nobody's going through the tunnel. We're worried that this isn't like we're being attacked. The tunnels may be bombed. And I was begging the guy to let me in. Another close call. And he says, no, you can't. So out I went back out to Long Island. And when I got out to Long Island, I went into my house in time to see the towers collapse. And I'm like, I'm watching hundreds of firemen, thousands of people getting killed. Right, I'm right before my eyes, like you did, and everybody else in the world saw that time. My brother, who lived in Cleveland at the time, but happened to be in New York visiting, he was a New York fireman in Ladder 7. He had been injured in the Empire State Building fire, so he had a back thing, and he was discharged with a disability pension. Moved to Cleveland with his wife, but happened to be in New York visiting. And I went over his house. I go, Michael, I can't watch this on TV anymore.
Let's go.
Exactly. And he said, do you have extra gear? And I go, I do. Let's go. My sister dropped us off at the train station. Got on the train. We went into Manhattan. Got out at Penn Station. I mean, this was like the next day. And firemen and policemen were pouring in from all over the country, well, all over the region, then the country, then the world. But at that time, it was just region. 2 cops upstate in a Hummer saw us with our gear. Get in. Took us down as far as we could get, and then the rest of the way we walked. And I tell you, Jeremy, when I turned the corner with my brother and I saw that smoking pile, I mean, I collapsed in tears just to think not only of the tremendous loss and wave of grief that's going to come from this, but just the idea that, in the name of religion or whatever your personal agenda is, you did this to the biggest city in the world? I mean, what possible reason could you have to do something this on this scale. It was just too overwhelming to even like consider. And then I started thinking about, I just left the firehouse the morning before, who were blocks away from it. And me and my brother Michael actually found the truck Ladder 3, which now sits in the World Trade Center Museum. And we actually found it. Half of it, the front half, I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. The front half of it's completely collapsed. And I said, and then I found somebody, and my brother knew a person that worked in the medical unit. And he said, Joe, here's the missing list. I'm like, missing? Missing? They're not missing. This is.
Yeah.
And I go down the list, and sure enough, I see. And I go, what about Ladder 3? And he goes, Joe, nobody from Ladder 3 made it. 12 gone. And then as we read through the list, of course, I knew 25 other guys that I work with regularly, close friends. And I'm like, missing, because nothing was sure yet. You know, they didn't know for sure, but you look around,
They're trying to maintain that optimism still.
a little bit.
That
Yeah,
there's
and
some hope.
that's what the whole search and rescue and recovery was like. Maybe we're going to find somebody. And
Right.
within days, I just said, this is a recovery. This isn't a rescue, you know. And then
Right.
what I did for the members of Ladder 3 is, because we had a live tape of all of us in the kitchen, I had tapes made and brought them to each family member. And I said, listen, this is your final,
Yeah.
your spouse, your husband's final moments. Oh no, we appreciate it so much. So that was the 9/11 story. I didn't want to go that deep into it, but it's also part of it.
I mean, your story is very powerful. I mean, you were there to witness history, and I don't even know if you know this of what today is, but 13 years ago today, Osama bin Laden was killed. So May 2nd. So
What
today's
was
the
that?
anniversary of them taking him out.
Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But I don't know how to make something, every cloud has a silver. I always say that about that. How does a cloud like that have a silver lining? I don't know that
Right.
I don't know that it does. Certainly it brought firefighters together, it brought community,
Well,
the
it brought the
world,
whole nation together. I mean, everywhere you went,
world.
people were driving with U.S. flags on their cars, and every house had a U.S. flag. And I can't think since then of a time when the nation was actually together in solidarity like that. Like nowadays, everybody's so divided.
Yeah,
And,
I know.
you just think back to September 12th and how much patriotism everybody had and how everybody came together and just kind of lifted each other up. And,
Oh, and
I hate that it took something like that to witness that much patriotism in this country. But,
the fire
you know,
community, I mean, it brought me to tears. I worked for a short period of time, like 6 months in Ladder 5 in Manhattan, which was another great firehouse to work in. And that's where we went to take showers and clean up and stuff like that. When we took our breaks from ground zero, went back to take a shower, clean up, maybe grab a bite to eat. And every time I went back there, I mean, a bulletin board as big as your house was filled with, and talk about the outpouring from the fire community. I mean, it gets me choked up to this day. Every day I went there, I'd see a bunch of German firemen standing on the apron of their firehouse in Germany somewhere, helmets off, saluting. It was just, the next day I'd see Belgium and Russia, and just amazing, like you said, bringing the community together. And
well, I think before September 11th, everybody knew a little bit about firemen and what they would do. But on September 11th, when those guys ran into those towers to save just one life, to help anybody they could, probably knowing full well, as you and I as firemen looking up at those buildings with that kind of heavy fire, it's not good. There's probably not too many signs of life on that fire floor or above. They went anyway. And everybody got to see and witness, what do they say about, courage? Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and going anyways.
yep,
And just seeing the courageous actions of those firefighters, and they gave the ultimate sacrifice. us as firemen, we know every time we go to work, that's a possibility. The public, they just see the fire trucks and wave, and they don't go to work knowing, hey, I might not make it home tonight, but I'm going to try and save a life if that's what it's going to take.
Right. And what I always try to tell people, you're being paid to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's
luck is
this
being in the right.
profession in a nutshell.
Yeah, luck is being in the right place at the right time, but you're consistently being paid to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You're not supposed to be in a burning building with the possibility of collapse, and you're not supposed to be there. You're being paid to be in the wrong place at the wrong time consistently, and it comes with the territory, and that's why, we kind of love it. The risk and the adventure and all that other stuff, which is why a young fireman doesn't want to be in a slow firehouse, like I said, wants to be in a busy firehouse.
We crave that action, we crave that adrenaline, and that's, I hate to say it, but it takes something like that to really make you feel alive, to really stand on that edge and just say, man, this is, it could all be over like that.
And that's one of the reasons I loved it, because if I went to work and I was like on the fence about, I don't know, treating myself to something, a trip, a meal, I'd be like, listen, firemen can be pretty frugal. I say the favorite four-letter word that begins with F for firemen. It's not the one you think. It's free.
Yeah.
So anytime I was on the fence about, my friends wanted to go on a cruise, I don't know, the money, I could put a new roof on my house with the money, and I'd go to work and be in some tenuous situation, I'd run home and book the cruise.
Yeah.
And even
tomorrow's never guaranteed. Take that trip now.
Yeah. And even the friends that I've lost, not only, line of duty is one thing, but then a lot of the cancers and stuff like that. I had a dear friend of mine pass away at 34 from cancer, one of my best friends in Ladder 129, and I used to take him for his treatments, and I'll never forget, I always wanted to go to Club Med, which is a big, crazy party place, and I took him for his treatment. He's the one that recommended it to me. And when I went to take him for one of his treatments, literally a 200-pound strapping fireman down to 120 pounds. I had to pick him up out of his bed. His ribs were hitting my arms. And he said, Joe, I hear you went to Club Med. I says, yeah, you were always telling me about it, Richie. I had a ball. It was great. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, you better make sure you go again in 6 months when I'm gone. And I said, Richie, I'll make you a promise. I will. And I did. So, but yeah, so now I guess we could fast forward to what I'm doing now, if you like.
Yeah,
after 9/11, I did a bunch of, because they turned FDNY into rock stars after 9/11, even though the terribleness of the event. So I got a lot of calls to do, and I made sure they donated money to, Firefighters Burn Center, Widow and Children's Fund, Ladder 3 in particular. And then I did a little children's book just for fun. And then, because of the cooking stuff. And so I got challenged so many times when I was doing stuff like you said, Firehouse Cook, what is he doing on TV and stuff like that. When I retired I actually went to culinary school and got my chef's degree, because I didn't want to be challenged on my cooking skills doing as much TV stuff as I was doing. And I'll never forget, I did a demo down in cooking demo down in Philadelphia, and some hoity-toity big chef walked by, and he says, oh, you don't need to know how to cook. All you need is big biceps and a uniform. And I remember hearing that, and it really bugged me. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go out and get my chef's degree so I don't have to hear that uniform thing again, that it wasn't based on being a fireman. So I got my chef's degree, did a lot of appearances and stuff, and I became like, I call it the cheap date celebrity. Like the big guys like Bobby Flay and Emerald and stuff like that, they're the A-listers. So I was like a W-lister, because I was so far down the. But there were opportunities to represent companies and do appearances, because they would look at, like, a Bobby Flay might get 200,000 an appearance, and they go, who do you have as a cheap date? So they would go down the list, A list, B list, C list, and they paid me decent money, travel, got to do appearances, sign books, stuff like that. So I was okay with being the cheap date celebrity.
Yeah, but also, who do more people have more things in common with? Those A-list celebrity chefs or a blue-collar worker?
Right, and that's what some of the companies looked at. Like, in other words, if you did a demo, more people would come. Like, I worked for Macy's. They had a new cookware called Tools of the Trade. And, like they'll come to see Bobby Flay, they don't care what he's selling or whatever. They might be more apt to listen to, like I said, a regular Joe, if you want, uh, with a little bit of culinary background. So, and listen, I was fine with that, you know. Um,
So you
and
got the formal
formal chef training.
training.
Yeah.
Did more cookbooks come after the formal training, or were all your cookbooks before
No, I
the
was doing a
formal
lot of
training?
appearances and stuff, and I didn't even think about doing another book. I wasn't approached by the editor to do a second book or anything like that. Um, and then, I guess something we got to talk about as the years went by, 2010, 11, my brother Michael, he's also a New York City fireman, tough to talk about, but in 2012 in Cleveland, he committed suicide. And that, talk about an incident that would rock your world. I think I thought I earned a free pass after 9/11 to not have another huge tragedy in my life. And he was handsome, good looking, no sign of this even happening. It was so shocking way to lose somebody. And I don't know if you've ever, in your department, you have.
Yeah, quite a few actually.
What's that?
Quite a few actually.
Quite a few.
Sadly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Same thing. You would never know. They wear that mask so well. Hey, I'm good. Everything's great. Got a great life. And then something like that happens, and the first thing everybody says is, I would have never expected that."
never in a million years. And it's the hardest loss to live with because, listen, I didn't want to lose my brother, but if I lost him as a fireman in a tragedy, even at 9/11, years when the grief subsided, I could live an honorable way to lose your life. And
Right.
not that because it's a mental health issue, and I don't want to say it's dishonorable, and it feels like it was a choice. Like, in other words, if he ran into 9/11 and the building collapsed and he died, that wasn't his choice. None of those guys, it was their choice.
Right.
But it feels like it's a choice when somebody took their life because they acted on it. They didn't have to act on it, but they didn't. It's a mental health thing. And I'm saying that because I
Right.
don't want to disrespect anybody that's lost somebody to suicide.
Well, I used to use the analogy that I used to always tell people, like when we would lose a member on the department. Oh, that's so selfish. Suicide's so selfish because all you do is transfer the pain that you had to the ones that loved you the most. It's not until I really fully like realized or understood it or talked to more people that I just went to a mental health symposium for first responders this past week, and the main speaker was saying, suicide is probably one of the hardest things that person has ever done. It's not easy to commit suicide, but the pain and the grief that they carry, it's so heavy, they just can't see taking one more step. And it kind of changed my mentality on it. I still, the mental health stigma it's still there, but it's not as prevalent as it was. There's avenues and there's actually more resources for us to use, but it's still quite a stigma in this profession.
No, absolutely. And I know it's
Right.
prevalent in so many departments. It's the god awful way of losing somebody. And, and there's no explaining it. Everybody asks why, did he get a divorce? Did he, you know, financial issues, job issues? And there's never a why to it because I said if divorce was the reason, then everybody that got divorced would kill themselves, and they don't.
Right.
Some do, and again, the hardest part about it as a fellow firefighter is like you said, sometimes there's not a sign of anything. You say it's usually. I just saw an unbelievable video, and I think it was slanted towards the fire service, and it showed two guys at a baseball game, and they were saying, and one guy's cheering every time there's a hit, and and the other guy's kind of like looks a little down and stuff like that. And it said, guess which, years later, guess which one killed himself? It wasn't the quiet guy that looked like he was down. It was the guy that was cheering every time there was. So there is no way to pinpoint who,
Right.
why,
Some
what.
people hide that. Some people hide that pain so well, and that's why I think that's why. Excuse me. It shocks some people sometimes when that happens. They're like, "Well, I was just with him yesterday. He was perfectly happy and perfectly fine." But
I have a message on my phone from him. Hey Joey, it's Michael. I'm doing a lot better, and you know, and 2 days later, I get the most god awful phone call I think I ever got in my life. really had a hard time with it. And I worked with Jeff Dill from WFFBHA.com .org. He's was a former captain in Palatine, Illinois.
And that's a Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance?
Exactly, yeah. Jeff Dill, unbelievable human being. I mean, he did so much to get me through it. I don't know that I would have got through it without it. You know, and there was a firefighter.
Make sure to put a link to them.
Yeah, FFBHA. He's amazing what he does for the fire service. And you know, I had I don't want to say a funny story about it. And there was a firefighter, Jeff Milton from Seattle. His son failed the EMT thing for his Seattle Fire Department, and he jumped off a bridge and he killed himself. And Jeff was having such a hard time with it. He went to one of the Jeff's retreats. And I was talking about it, like you said, why would somebody, like you said, how painful can it be that you either put a gun to your head or you jump off a building isn't that more painful? I mean, and listen, you and I both worked at heights in the fire department, and I'm sure you've been on a ladder and you look down and go, oh my God, if I took a head up from here, oof.
It's over. Yeah.
And somebody does it willingly. And
I don't know. That's,
so what a decision that is. And it's going to sound like the craziest thing. And I said to this guy, Jeff, I said, think about, like you say, how much pain can you be in? But I said to him, and that's one of the ways I said, if you ever been out in your car and you had to really do number 2 really bad, so bad, I mean, you're like, oh my God. And you go to it, you say, oh my God, there's a Walmart. And you don't know where the bathroom is. And you're running into the Walmart because you don't want to. I believe in some form, that's what I said to him, that's the kind of pain that they're in. Like, you don't want to, if I don't find but I'm going to find a bathroom. And if somebody stops you and says, hey, listen, before you go in, we want to you push the person out of the way. You push everybody out of the way to get there as fast as you can and feel relief. So I think that's the thing. They feel that this is going to give them relief from whatever it is that's bothering them. That relief is
I also know, I forget where I read that, or it's happened numerous times, people that have attempted suicide and have failed or it didn't go exactly the way that they thought it was going to go. They said immediately, as soon as they had tried to attempt it, they knew it was a huge mistake.
Yep. I'm just trying to lose my signal here. Damn it.
Oh, you're all right.
My phone is running down to almost nothing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I don't want to.
We should probably wrap this up then. I mean, we've been talking for almost an hour, and
okay.
I really appreciate your time.
Okay. Well, yep, I pretty much believe we covered everything. I wanted to talk a little bit about the TV show.
Yeah, let's talk real quick on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I just did. It's American Firehouse Cuisine. Built a set that looks like a New York City firehouse. I slide down the pole to start the show. I'm going to have guests on from around the country as I develop it. And
that's an entrance right there.
Yep, signature entrance that no other chef gets to do. And and then part of the money, if the show ever gets monetized, is going to go to ffbha.org. And I'm going to make it my goal to honor the firefighters from 9/11, firefighters from all around the country. Keep the firehouse tradition of cooking alive, and that's kind of my goal with it.
That's great.
So
yeah, firehouse cooking, it goes hand in hand with the theme of this podcast is the firehouse table. We know how special that table is for us, not only because we eat some really good meals there, but after calls, you debrief, you sit down, you talk about it, what went right, what went wrong. Somebody's having family problems, you sit there and talk. It's kind of like our little therapy session. I don't know if you heard the short story my buddy Skittles wrote about the firehouse table. It was like one of the first episodes, but that's kind of the theme of this podcast, is just somewhere to just sit down and talk these things over. And it's pretty important.
Yep. And preventing suicide. Boy, if Jeff or me can prevent one firefighter from making that terrible decision, when I think about it, I think that somewhere in there, if you want to call it circuit breakers, I'm sure I I don't know you that well, but I'm sure it's not, no matter what goes wrong in your life, it might not be even a circuit breaker that would go off to take your life. But I think as things go wrong, it becomes an option. It might only be option 25. Like, I could get divorced. I might meet somebody else. Yeah, I'll get through this financial crisis. But if none of this works out, option 25 is take my life. It can never be an option, even if it's option 50. Because what happens is, as things go wrong in your life, it moves from 50 to 40 to 30 to 10. I got divorced. I'm losing my house. My kids don't talk to me anymore. The job isn't respected. And now it starts to, all those stuff start ending up in the circuit breaker. And now you say, wow, option 10 starts to be option 3. And then all you need is 2 more circuit breakers to go off, and you go to this terrible mental place that becomes a choice.
Well, I think the big thing is we need to just make sure our guys know, just put your pride aside and ask for help. That's the hard. It seems to be the hardest thing for a lot of people, is just that initial, hey man, I'm not doing so well.
Hard thing to admit.
You can put your pride aside and actually reach out to someone, even if it's just a talk, and open that door and go after those resources that you need and take that option off the table completely.
Yep.
Totally agree. So AmericanFireHouseCuisine.com is your website as well.
Yep. You can see the
YouTube
shows there.
Channel. Your shows are on the website as well?
Yeah, the shows are on the website. You can get a hold of me personally if you want through the website. If anybody out there is listening, interested in being a guest, give me a shout. You're going to be down in the Tampa, St. Pete area. Love to have you on as a guest. Bring your favorite recipe. Even write in and send your recipe. That'd be great too. But
I may have to do that sometime.
Yeah.
I'm no culinary chef, but
that's okay.
We're all firehouse cooks. That's Everybody
okay.
Gets a chance.
Meatloaf and mashed potatoes is good enough for me. and I'll also put it out to any of the firefighters listening. If you're struggling or anything, ffbha.org. Or
I'm going to put a link in the show notes to
I've been through it. Call support at American Firehouse Cuisine. Email me personally. I'll get right back to you.
Got it.
And we'll get through it.
Awesome. Joseph, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you,
really
sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoy what you heard, be sure to drop us a follow. We'll try to release a new episode every other week. If you feel so inclined, take a moment and give us a review. Your support only serves to make this podcast better. And if you know of any first responder, military veteran, or family member who you think would be a great guest for us, drop us a line. Our email address is firehousetabltalks@gmail.com. Be safe, look out for one another, and we'll see you around the table next time.
After time around the firehouse kitchen table, we can go home to the ones we love.